Donald Trump is going to perhaps single-handedly explode the worldwide number of HIV cases thanks to a move he just made. And if you think that I'm being hyperbolic, well, sure, I tend to be, but I think that there's good reason to believe it in this case. So as part of a larger block on aid to foreign countries, Trump has frozen former President George W. Bush's PEPFAR program. That's the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. It has been estimated to have saved 25 million lives during the years it's run, which, look, I'm not in the business necessarily of giving George W. Bush credit for a lot of things, but this seems like, when he said he wanted to be a compassionate conservative, he would occasionally actually try to do something like that. Donald Trump says that he's a Christian or whatever and doesn't do anything to actually make good on that. And so we've got instant chaos as a result of this program being put on hold. Appointments are being canceled, patients are being turned away from clinics, according to people with knowledge of the situation, who don't feel like they can speak about it publicly, probably for good reason. Many people with HIV are facing abrupt interruptions in their treatment, even if the drugs have already been obtained and are sitting in local clinics. And apparently this did happen very fast. On Monday afternoon, officials worldwide were alerted that PEPFAR's data systems would shut down at 6 p.m. Eastern. That's roughly 3 hours after the email was received. That's the amount of time they had to prep for this. Immediately closing off access to all data sets, reports, and analytical tools as well. And so let's talk a little bit about consequences. So one study estimated that if PEPFAR were to end, as many as 600,000 lives would be lost over the next decade in South Africa alone. And that nation relies on PEPFAR for only 20% of its entire spending combating HIV. Some poorer countries, particularly in Africa, are almost entirely dependent on the program. That's where all of their funding goes from. And so, look, I don't have a study to say how if it's 600,000 in South Africa, what that means for the entire continent, but it's definitely millions at that point. And so, call me hyperbolic or whatever, call all those concerned about this extremists or like they're being radical or something, but this is absolute madness. And it's just it's not only an objectively good thing to do, but what an amazing return on our investment that these countries, the people in them, will think about us, because America is actually genuinely doing something good, not just invading and bombing and all that, doing nation building, but actually building a community, building health and all that. And to cut this off is just so both on brand and needlessly cruel. Tori, what do you make of this?
First off, I just want to give a breath and some space for people that are on those programs, because sometimes we rush into our arguments. And I just want to say that this is, like you said, just cruel. And I think sometimes we don't give a little bit of space around that. So I just want to hold space about how, if you're one of those people, not only is that awful, I understand personally. I'm from DC, and I just want to say my story a bit. My mom was born with Gaucher's disease. It's an enzyme metabolic deficiency disorder, which is all to say she's missing an enzyme. And for a long time, my mom couldn't walk growing up. And the National Institutes of Health is where I went every weekend, because they were doing a trial, and she was the 12th out of the 12. And they discovered a way to get the damned enzyme. And she got that, and she started walking in my lifetime, okay? If that had been stopped, paused, to look at the waste that might be going on, I just want you to personalize this story. That means stopping instantly. Like you said, 3 hours. Any kind of movement towards a cure for these things, pain management for these things, a future in a leader as we are as the global health leader in all of the world. But just personally, my mom might have stopped walking again.
Yeah.
So on a micro scale, this affects people in ways that you think, oh, he's pausing it. That's great to look at waste. When you pause something like that, the word you just said, consequences, that would be a consequence. These people with HIV, that would be a consequence. So just take a moment and make this human, because it really is when you do this. So I hope that wasn't so ooey gooey hippy dippy, but sometimes the numbers get overwhelming. And I wanted to report from a personal standpoint how much NIH means and meant to my family.
I mean, that's amazing that they were able to do that. And your comparison, I think, is particularly apt, because he did last week also put a pause on the NIH's studies and research.
Right. Yeah.
So again, just bear in mind, some people might be watching this and be like, I don't care what happens in South Africa. Well, he's doing it here too. first of all, you shouldn't care what happens in South Africa.
Yeah, that's a given. Yeah, right.
I would love it if you would, but he's also doing it here, okay? So bear that in mind. And our final note from the producers, and everybody knows this, when you get like, when you're taking antibiotics, they tell you, even if you start to feel better, you have to take the full course of it.
Correct.
One of the reasons for that is if you don't, that is how resistant strains develop. A lot of these people across the continent have been doing a similar sort of treatment. And if it stops now, that could lead to drug resistant and antibiotic resistant strains of HIV in addition. And so it's mad and it's cruel and it's obviously not Christian or whatever religion a particular MAGA person might claim to be. It's anti-science, it's absolute madness. This is a sort of daily chaos that I did not want us to have to return to.
Yeah.
There's a reason the show is called The Damage Report, okay? And we're once again every day having to wake up to the chaos and report the damage.